Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer from ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. And today, our speaker is Laura Boccanfuso, who is the CEO and founder of Van Robotics, Inc., which produces the ABii educational robot. Congratulations, Laura, on winning the ISSIP Annual Award for Impact on Society. As we were just talking, it's a fantastic innovation, and we're looking forward to learning more from you. So I'll turn it over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much. We are thrilled to receive the recognition and the honor of the ISSIP Award, and we're so excited to share what we've been doing with you and with your guests today. So I'm going to share my screen. I think what I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes doing is really just talking about the journey that we've taken to get to where we are today, and really sort of to talk about how that journey has informed both the product development and then also ultimately the translation of that university work into the marketplace. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Great.
Perfect. Great. So this is ABii. If you haven't seen it, it's a little 16-inch robot that we've designed and built, and it works primarily with K-5 students to accelerate math, reading, and social and emotional learning skills in school. So to give you a little background about our team, my background is really in computer science and engineering. I spent about 10 years doing academic research, first at the University of South Carolina as a PhD student, working with the School of Medicine and really looking at what were the barriers that a lot of children were sort of encountering when it came to learning new things. And so that work led me to accepting a postdoc and later a research scientist position with Yale, where I met Aditi, who is the CTO of the company, who was doing her PhD research, basically looking at how we can leverage robots and technologies like social robots to support direct tutoring for students in elementary and middle school. And then the rest of our team kind of came to the company from either computer science or industry experience. We have AWS EdStart program leader, Chris Kraft, who's also a professional development person with the EdTech team. And then a number of educators who basically came on board to help us really design, pedagogically sound, curriculum, right? We didn't have a lot of that coming into building the product. So we have a really great a team I'm super proud of that represents all the major stakeholders in our market. So we built ABii. ABii is a personal learning coach. It basically helps students in 3 different ways. First, it can adapt to the skill level of a student. So when ABii is working one-on-one with a student, that student essentially will have directed, differentiated instruction, which means that the robot will level up or level down depending on how the student is performing. It'll also actually adjust the pace of the lesson and break things down in a little bit more detail if the student isn't getting things right. It's also monitoring attention and adapting its behavior to attention. So Jim, if you're not paying attention to a lesson, during the course of the lesson, ABii will actually pause the math or reading lesson, call you out, right? And say, hey, Jim, you need to pay attention. You're about to miss something really important on the screen. And then really encourage you to stay focused on the screen and get back to the lesson itself. If the inattention is chronic, ABii will actually pause the lesson again and lead the student through a brain break. So these are kind of techniques and strategies that we've seen educators and interventionists use in the field. So when a teacher has a group of 20, 25 students, and they're restless and they're not paying attention, they're not focused, oftentimes we'll see them turn down the lights and sort of lead students through a breathing break, or they'll do a stretch break, or they'll even do a get up and wiggle it out break. These are all things that are embedded in the technology that ABii now has available for students. And last but definitely not least, the real big differentiator with ABii is not just that it's using AI to adapt a skill and attention, and really providing sort of that supervised learning that is needed, especially nowadays. But it's also developed around this idea that we need to support students from a holistic perspective, right? That we need to also have the ability to connect with students on a social level, right? To build them up, to teach them strong learning habits like persistence and grit, right? The growth mindset characteristics that we want all students to learn, especially when they're young, because we know that at some point in their academic career and even in their life, they're going to encounter situations where they need to use some strong persistence and problem-solving skills. So how did we get to the point where we could launch a robot like ABii? I'll give you a quick background of sort of how things got started. Back when I was a PhD student, I built this robot called Charlie. Charlie was really designed to work with preschool and early elementary school kids. So we wanted it to look really fuzzy and really kind of approachable, like a stuffed animal would. But it had some pretty cool technology in the back end that would allow it to basically imitate what students were doing. So one of the main applications of my PhD research was really looking at how we can leverage technologies to support students with autism. And so for about 6-7 years, we built these technologies that essentially would imitate students. And so this was the very first sort of foray into the robot development cycle. And so it helped us not only to understand how we can improve social skills, but also how people communicate. It helped us understand how robots can increase engagement. So we looked at, why a robot, right? It's one of the first questions we always get, right? Why not just use a screen? It's cheaper, it's more ubiquitous, right? We can get them out faster. But the thing is that there's significant and statistically significant differences in engagement when you have a socially engaging robot, physically embodied robot compared to a screen. And we see this time and time again. So this was a very major part of our research, was really looking at and testing the hypothesis that, hey, I mean, if we could build a screen-based application, why not go down that road? But it just wasn't supported with the research. So we continued down the path of looking at how robots can really help students. And we looked at things like, so if you have a robot that can engage with students, what kinds of things can you use robots to help us learn about? Can you help us to learn about what motivates students, how they respond to different stimuli, right? If you have a student that's struggling with expressing their emotions, how can you use a robot to help them feel more comfortable or to identify what those are and talk about them? We also looked at things like, what are some of those key strategies that teachers are using to break down the barriers, right? If the student is lacking confidence, or if the student is really very distracted, right? What kinds of strategies and techniques are the experts in the field already using to support students? And the reason we were looking and asking these questions is because we knew that we had seen some great successes in the lab and in our limited field work, but the big opportunity was to translate this to the market. And if it was going to be successful, we needed to emulate and to support what was already being effective in the field. So we also looked at learning habits. We looked at what are students typically doing to get around not solving problems, gaming the system, trying to basically, find ways to sort of get to the answers without necessarily going through all of the steps that were needed to really understand, fully comprehend the problem solving process. So we looked at this, and this was actually part of Aditi's research at Yale, was really looking at, right, how are students getting to the answers? What are some metacognitive skills like talking things out, eliminating potential answers, that kind of thing, that can really help students with long-term academic success? We also then decided, well, we can look at sort of from a broad spectrum, let's take all these pieces that we've researched and let's see if we can actually build a single robot that can then coalesce, right? Sort of aggregate all this learning that we had done over the last decade and put together a robot that could really highlight the best of the things that we'd seen, right? Really leverage the benefits and the value that we'd seen in the field already. So then it comes, right, then we get to the point where we say, okay, when we tested this robot, we've looked at it empirically, right? We've seen that, okay, there is definite possibility to support a great market adoption by something like this. But what does the market currently look like? So we basically started to look at the education field, right? What are schools doing right now? What are they struggling with? What's their pain point? And what we saw is that even before COVID, teacher attrition was tremendously high. It was already 8% before COVID hit. Now the numbers are at an all-time high. And so what that means is essentially the existing teachers in the classroom are they're taking on all of the extra stresses of having more students in their classroom because there's fewer teachers. They're expected to handle a more diverse population of students that have different learning needs, who may or may not have training to do all of that they need to do in a given day. So this is a major problem. And we saw that what happened during the school day was there was a dedicated part of the day to whole group instruction. So they would have one teacher teaching 20, 25 students. Then there was another part of the day, which was dedicated to independent learning time, right? Or small group workshop time. These are times when students are typically working by themselves or in small groups. And there's normally no one actually supervising that instruction at that point. They're given a worksheet, they're given an online app. Nothing is actually interacting with them socially or really monitoring their attention during that time. So we saw this was an actual opportunity for us to help support some of these pain points. The second thing was we looked at the existing solutions and we looked at online apps. Well, if online apps were so effective because they're prolific, right? In schools today, online apps are the go-to technology choice for most schools. Problem is, if you look at the numbers, this is the national report card for grade 4 for public school students in math. And if you think about the timeline at which, this is the highlight, this is the main sort of gist and the main time when online apps were being deployed in the market, especially in schools. And you see that it's essentially flatlined, right? I mean, there is no true growth happening for the vast majority of students in this field. So what we decided was, okay, so we have this problem with teacher attrition. There's fewer teachers, more students. The technologies that they're using are not very effective. They are effective for certain groups of the population. You could look at the top echelon. The top 6% of students are actually growing marginally, but they are growing over the last 10 years. The vast majority of, on average, which is 70+% of the student population, and below average, which is another 20-some% of the population, they are essentially not growing. And so the question is, what's missing, right? What is it that they're not getting that we can provide? So we looked at how does ABii, this prototype that we had built at the time, it was the very first beta that was out in the field in 2019. We looked at how can it actually help students compared to these online apps. So we got a grant from the Department of Education and we decided to enroll 30 schools. We got as many schools as we could get on board. They were very eager to try the technology, which was great. But we had basically 30 schools enrolled. We had about 850 students. And we said, all right, let's test it out, right? Let's see how the robot compares to these online apps and see if there's a significant difference. What we did see is after 4 weeks, we had a random control trial, right? So teachers randomly assigned students to the control group or the study group. The control group got their normal whole group instruction plus whatever online apps they were using. The study group got their whole group instruction and then used ABii for 2 to 3 times per week for 4 weeks. Each group got the same paper and pencil test right before the study started and right at the end of 4 weeks. And we looked at how many students improved from both groups. And then we looked at how much improvement those students actually showed. So you can see there was a pretty good number of about 15% difference between the number of students that improved in the study group compared to the control group. This was encouraging. This was good news. But what was really empirically significant was this number here, right? The pre to post test improvement for kids that worked with ABii was 15% on average, compared to 3% on average with the online apps. So this was telling us that we were onto something here. This was something that was, and now had some evidence behind it that showed not only that individually these different things can help students grow, but this particular product in the market could actually affect these changes. So the Department of Ed was so excited, they gave us a second grant the next year, same study basically, except for math. This time we did reading and grade 2. Same study. This time we only did 10 schools because a lot of the schools unfortunately shut down during COVID. But again, we saw pretty good results for the number of students that improved. So we helped more students than were being helped with the online apps. And for those students that were helped, again, we saw pretty dramatic increases in their proficiencies in reading. So this was, again, telling us that it wasn't just the subject, right? It wasn't just like, okay, the robot can be good for math. The robot was also good now for reading. And so this got us thinking about some of the biggest questions that are in the market today, right? Social emotional learning is a major concern among a lot of teachers, administrators, parents, and a lot of students. We see that the suicide rate, the depression rate, the anxiety rate among students is higher than it's been in decades. And one of the things that I think is really important to look at in the research is social emotional learning is the backbone to not just emotional wellness, right? Not just wellness in general, but it is really the foundation for success in many areas. And I think that when we talk about social emotional learning, I think we need to think about it as being part and parcel of everything else we do. So having said that, we decided to reach out to a national curriculum provider. We had partnered actually with the Haydenhurst Family Foundation, which is a nonprofit that really works to helping elementary school, middle school students learn about social emotional learning to help with mental wellness. And so we partnered with them. We donated a couple of robots to their group. They introduced us to the curriculum developer of the InFocus curriculum, the SEL InFocus curriculum, and we partnered with them. And so we started building ABii lessons that complemented this mental wellness program, and applied again for a third grant from the Department of Ed. But I guess I don't have that information here, but that third grant is ongoing. It's our largest study to date. It's about 30 weeks long. We have 1,200 students involved. And in total for these three grants, I think we have about 57 schools represented. So really excited because the number of students that have been impacted just from these research studies is about 4,000 students. And the SEL results will be out hopefully by June, as soon as we get all of the post assessments back. So super excited about that. So ABii is really sort of this product that we've gone through the cycle of development of research, right? We've looked at the empirical research. We looked at how you can translate it and really test out the market to see if it was ready for something like this. See if our prospective customers would be receptive to a product like this. And I think what's really interesting is, you know, and this is probably my own naivete about the startup process, but you know, I thought, and our early team members thought, you know, if we follow sort of this formula of how to translate the product market, that this was going to be something that would just happen, right? You check off all the boxes, yeah. You like, do you do research, right? You test out the market, you see if it's good. You do the necessary work, and that I think is really encouraged, especially from accelerators. And you think that that's just going to be sort of the straight path, and that is just absolutely not true. So I think that, you know, looking at, you know, how we've been using the robot, now we're in, you know, 38 states, we're in 7 countries. We have large school districts covering their classrooms in every school with robots, 2 robots in every classroom, essentially from K through 5, and in a number of school districts, over 250 schools now. And that's just been in a period of 2 years. And I think back to when we were first getting started, and I do want to just point out that it was definitely not a straight line, right? It was definitely not sort of a solved problem. This is sort of the trajectory that we've taken, and I think it's important to talk about this because I'm grateful that we have the resources from universities that helped us kind of find that early seed stage funding. And I'm also really motivated to share with other entrepreneurs or people that are thinking about starting their own companies that thinking outside the box and being resourceful about where your first funding comes from is definitely important. And I think, you know, when we think about this, you know, as a computer scientist, right, we think about solved problems. Right. This is definitely not a solved problem, right? Starting a company is definitely not like one of those formulaic things you can follow. However, I think there are lots of opportunities for people to kind of carve out their own path. So we really started when I was a postdoc at Yale. I was looking at translating the technology, the robots that we've been building. And I approached the venture creation program, which is now called IDEA. They've changed the umbrella name of that organization. But it was the lean startup method. It was a summer program, and it was great because it kind of got your feet wet as far as what are some of the questions you should be asking yourself if you're really thinking about starting a company. That was great, but that again was sort of just germinating the ideas and sort of getting more knowledge. Fortunately, we applied for some seed funding from SCRA, which is a local organization here, which is comprised of government, corporate funding that basically is awarded to startups. And so we got a very small seed startup grant from SCRA that helped us do prototyping. So we essentially built, you know, our first, I think it was 6 robots or 8, I think it was 8 robots. And we were going to take those robots. The idea was we're going to build these 8 robots by hand. We're going to 3D print them, we're going to assemble them ourselves. And we're just going to take them out to, right? We're just going to take them out to the market, and we're going to collect some data and see how things go, see how the students like them, see what the teachers have to say, see how good the robots work with students. And so that was great. That helped us kind of get our feet wet. And it helped us actually get on the radar of this Techstars accelerator in Austin. That's where things really started to change for us, right? Because we were really starting to step into this idea that we could formulate a viable company from this research that we had been doing for so many years, and the market that we had come to learn about and come to really know a little bit more about over the previous 2 years. So again, we were still in this learning process, right? From the idea to the SRA seed stage and building these 8 robots, going into Techstars. Basically, it was a funnel of information that we were kind of digesting and putting into practice. But it wasn't until we left Techstars that I realized where this big gap is. Try Googling, you know, how to find funding for your startup. Because I did, right? Because I was no longer part of the university setting, and there were some opportunities at Yale, and there are plenty of universities I think that have, you know, licensing and technology transfer offices, right? The question is, how accessible are those things to people who are ready to take their product outside the university and really launch a company independently? So when you look at how to fund your startup, nowhere on that list is federal grants.
Interesting.
Right. So Startup Grind has a great publication, an online publication, and in that article it says 9 best ways to fund your startup. Not a single mention of federal grants. There's a small business administration grant is one of them, sort of the middle to the bottom of the list. But for us, right, for people that are looking at translating, you know, university research to the market, this is a great resource. And I think sometimes we forget that federal governments, federal agencies are interested fundamentally in translating their research to the market. And so anyway, this was really the foundation. This is where we got I think it was about a total of $1.7 million from the Department of Education and the NIH to basically get our company off the ground. That was really where we were able to bring on people, we were able to build the team, we were able to actually manufacture a commercial product. And and then after that, of course, we had some great fortune in that we were, you know, selected to be on Shark Tank, and we got the one of Time's Best Inventions for 2020, and that helped us kind of get the word out about the product.
Fantastic.
So in a nutshell, I think that sort of encapsulates our journey as a company and through the product development cycle. And and that it's been a
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. And, you know, it's just wonderful to see this story unfolding. I feel like we're seeing it still, you know, it's not like at the beginning of the beginning, but it's still, you know, kind of like maybe in the middle or of the beginning, because the empirical work on improving student performance is one thing, but this big study that you have going now on the social emotional study, I really can't wait to see what you're going to learn from that big study. And I guess my question for you, I've got two questions.
Sure.
You've made some really clear points about you know, how you tried to proceed very systematically and analytically. I think that's an amazing story entering the market. But I guess my question is maybe a broader question. Can you say a little bit more about what the next markets that you might go after are, and where is the future offerings? Where do you see some of the future offerings for your company?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So one of the best things I think that has come from this research is the wellness and support. The social support that we've seen has had a huge impact on everything else, right? The academics, the behavior in class. And so a couple of years ago, we actually started a grant with a couple of other organizations, University of Georgia, the Gerontology Center, and a medical equipment, medical device engineering company in Minneapolis. And we essentially have this agreement and this development of a new robot called Mari, which is essentially developed to really help older adults with mild cognitive impairment by, instead of tutoring math and reading or social emotional learning, it's actually tutoring them piano. So it does introductory and intermediate piano lessons for them. It has music appreciation built in, so they can reflect on music, talk about how it makes them feel. And this is kind of a known connection for older adults with cognitive impairment, that really tapping into some of that musical memory and helping them sort of practice some piano playing can actually help with their cognitive acuity, but also with their mood. So super excited about that. We're in year 3, getting ready to start year 4 of that study. And we have clinical trials going on right now for that.
And if I can squeeze in one more question, what is your view on the future of expertise? I know that's a broad one, but
yeah, that's a great question. I think the future of expertise in terms of how it's applied to to companies and to industry is that it's not traditionally what we think it is, where it's coming from anymore. I think our expertise, for example, our team has PhDs with physics backgrounds, economics backgrounds, a lot of educators. We have such an amalgamation of people with different expertise that are all contributing in a very valuable way to what we're doing. And so I think that our understanding of what will be best suited for a particular role is changing in a good way. So
yeah, it sounds like what you're hinting at there is that, it's not using the stocks of their old knowledge as much as their desire to learn new things and challenge themselves and continuously learn. So fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, and that underpinning that, if I could just add one last thing, is their desire to change something positive in the world. And I think that's a very motivating characteristic they all share.
Kind of connecting to that bigger mission that's going to make the future more exciting and a better, more positive place. Fantastic, Laura. Well, thank you and congratulations again on your ISSIP award. Great presentation. I'll share this on the ISSIP YouTube.
Thanks so much.
And also the presentation. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.